Top Med Talk.
Nick Majerison here. This piece is taken from the Perioperative Medicine Special Interest Group's 2018 annual conference, Measuring, Managing and Minimising Risk, which was held in association with the Australian and New Zealand Society of Geriatric Medicine and the Internal Medicine Society of Australia and New Zealand. Don't forget to check out the show notes on topmedtalk.com.
So our next speaker is Associate Professor Bruce Waxman. He is a retired colorectal surgeon with 30 years of experience at Monash Health, and he's also an administrator, so we're hoping that David Story's not here. Thanks very much. Welcome to the stage.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dick. And in particular, thanks, Ross Kerridge, for giving me the opportunity of coming and speaking at this really incredible meeting, which I think has been extremely successful. And you'll be happy to know that I'm not talking about blood, and I'm going to be focusing mainly on risk reduction, and also I'm going to slow the pace down a bit. Not too many graphs, not too many tables, just straightforward, clear thinking. And also maybe convince you that surgeons can think outside the square. Before I commence, I do have two disclosures. The most important, they're both very important. I had a stroke in 2010 and I'm on warfarin. And I'm very pleased I take warfarin because I know it can be stopped quickly if I have a vascular procedure that needs to be done. So thanks, Kate, for that reassurance. The second disclosure is I'm married to an anaesthetist who became an intensive care specialist, and so I think I have a reasonable amount of insight into perioperative medicine, and I have a great respect for my colleagues in anaesthesia and intensive care. So I'm going to, as I mentioned, slow the pace down a bit and look at me from two aspects, both sides of the same coin. As a medical administrator, of course, that's the heads, and the tails is a colorectal surgeon because I spent most of my life looking up other people's tails. Come to that a bit later. So my different roles, I was a colorectal surgeon for 30 years, and I made a decision to make a clean break, and I got the opportunities of moving into medical administration, and I've taken that opportunity, and I've moved from a fairly sophisticated tertiary hospital to a rural hospital in southwest Gippsland in Bass Coast Health. And I'll start off first with looking at things from the point of view of the medical administrator, the heads. And I'll be covering these issues, Bass Coast Health, where I work, and the fantastic doctors I work with in the rural setting, issues about clinical governance, and that's what basically medical administrators are all about, and then look at how we've looked at clinical governance reform in developing a competency framework, a capability framework, and then, thanks to my colleague Prani Buttery, who's here today, looking at some of the risk management in perioperative services, and in particular the AMBER meetings which we developed together. I might say that some people think that administrator is on the dark side, transferred into the dark side, but actually as a colorectal surgeon, there's a little song that says, colorectal surgeons work where the sun don't shine. So I've always been on the dark side, and so I haven't really moved very far. Where is Wonthaggi? It's in what's now called South Gippsland Coast. Probably most of you know Phillip Island because of the penguins, and so we're in that region, and it's an outer rural hospital. The VMOs that work there are mainly GPs from the Wonthaggi Medical Group, who provide all the inpatient care, including anaesthesia and obstetrics. And we have a range of specialist surgeons who visit and perform elective surgery, and they tend to be, if you like, fly in, fly out, usually operating 1 to 2 days a month and consulting. So that's the background to the hospital where I came to as a medical administrator. And when I came to the hospital, it was in crisis. I had problems with clinical governance. The CEO was sacked, and so I had a new CEO. There was a lack of systems, particularly around processes and information, a lack of hospital service control, problems with some significant clinical incidents. We were working outside our capability. There's a fairly low self-sufficiency, that is, a lot of our patients were transferred out, and there was this Djerrawurra effect. Now, some of you who are interstate don't know what the Djerrawurra system was, or the problems at Djerrawurra, also known as Bacchus Marsh Hospital, and as a consequence of a significant number of perinatal deaths, the Victorian government made a significant change in clinical governance across Victoria, developing Safer Care Victoria as a consequence. So what did we do about our problems? We undertook an external review, and that provided a report for us with 29 recommendations. One particular one was about competencies and capabilities. So we needed to do some work on that. We set up a series of steering committees looking at how we could improve our issues regarding clinical governance, and implemented a clinical governance plan. The first issue we had to deal with was competency. And we had to make sure that the doctors working in our hospital were competent. And so we developed a competency framework. And the components of that I've outlined typically for a GP anaesthetist, which cover their basic discipline qualification, the mandatory training for that discipline outlined there, the need to be JCCA registered for their CPD, and to undergo mandatory training based on the hospital education programs, things like hand hygiene. But also we instigated an annual performance development reviews. So each year I visit with and have a chat to the GPs and the VMOs to get an understanding of how they are complying with the competency framework. The other issue that we needed to look at was capability. Unlike every other state in Victoria, and although we do have Safer Care Victoria, we do not have a capability framework, unlike all other states that do. So we had to therefore develop our own capability framework, and again, Parani was very instrumental in putting that together. I won't bore you with how we actually did it, but we followed the New South Wales guidelines as a Level 3 hospital. And as a consequence of that capability framework and realising what our capability was, we developed, with Parani's input, this AMBER meeting. But more about that a bit later. So what were the risks that we identified in the perioperative space? Remembering that the topic for this meeting is all about risk management and risk reduction. There were three major risks that we found. The first was that about surgical access model. Being a small rural hospital, we didn't have the sophistication of some of the metro hospitals. We had limited information for planning, no REA. The surgeons tended to manage their own waiting lists, and the pre-anaesthetic assessment, although it did exist, was somewhat, with due respect, a bit of a rubber stamping. So our solutions to that was to appoint a elective surgery access coordinator, introduce an REA and a patient health questionnaire, develop a capability framework, upgrade the peri-anaesthetic assessment, introducing stop bang, because we do have a lot of patients in our area with obstructed sleep apnea, and the AMBER meetings. So what is an AMBER meeting? We did call it an orange meeting, but in obstetrics we have an orange meeting, very similar structure, because we realised in maternity services there were significant risks. And it's a multidisciplinary meeting. I've outlined the members there. Coordinated by the ESAC, and the main function is to review all the pre-anaesthetic assessments done by our GP anaesthetists and looking at high-risk patients, and particularly those who may be outside our capability framework. And we found the benefits were to improve risk management, or reducing risk. It improved the dialogue between ourselves and our anaesthetists. It was very much patient-focused, and there was a great educational exercise for all involved in that process. One of the keys was the introduction of stop-bang. Who here knows about stop-bang? So I'm preaching to the converted, that's good. So I don't need to go through this in detail. Here's a fairly typical male from the Wonthaggi area here sitting on a park bench. We have a very high incidence of obesity in our male population. And so we risk stratified these patients based on their stop-bang, and as you know, greater than 5 is high risk. And that's helped a lot in the AMBER meeting process. The other risk we identified was in the GP anaesthetist model. The risk were this variable training and variable compliance with JCCA. And I'm happy to say we've been able to engage very well with the GP anaesthetists through the pre-anaesthetic assessment process and stop-bang, the AMBER meetings, and with JCCA registration, and in upgrading the peer review meetings. So that's been a great success. The other issue, and I think it's not just Wonthaggi Hospital that has this problem, I think it's maybe endemic everywhere, and that is the culture in the operating theatre. And how can we deal with this? The risks are outlined there and well illustrated in that cartoon at the top. Everyone's sort of doing their own thing and doesn't necessarily want to be involved in teamwork, whereas the so-called cartoon from Legoland, the second photograph shows that working is in a team really helps. So some of the solutions that we've put in place are about this teamwork, understanding some of the drivers, reducing isolation, but in particular, the opportunities for learning. And then, again, Parani's been very much involved with the staff in theatre. And I'll put in my particular interest, and that is the importance of random acts of kindness. We'll talk a bit about kindness a bit later. So that's me as an administrator. What about me, the other side of the coin, as a colorectal surgeon? Again, operating on the tail end of our patients. And what I'll do is go through a number of things that I think we as surgeons have been involved with and introduced to reduce the risks in perioperative medicine. And I'll go through those one by one. So it's more of a potpourri of things that we surgeons contribute to the team. The first you've heard about quite a lot today, and that's about the pre-anaesthetic assessment and the pre-admission clinic. And I've learned a bit today about shared decision-making, and we should probably add that as part of the MDD process. Also, I'll be illustrating some of the small studies that we've done over the years, and we did do a small study at Dandenong Hospital showing that the pre-admission clinic worked, a small study some time ago, but I think it was significant. And you can see that in all the studies I've done, it have been with anaesthetists, John Monagle being the first author on this study. What about the perioperative physicians? I've been very fortunate to work with one mainly in private practice. It doesn't work so well in the public, but there are good programs that are being developed. The great thing about my perioperative physician, whose name was Ian Main, is the bottom line. He could manage all the perioperative fluids and medications for me. But the top line is probably the most important. He's a very valued colleague and was able to deal with the medical problems that my patients had. The next issue I'll focus with is the checklist in the operating theatre, the importance of teamwork, and the role of cockpit resource management. I think the most important part in the timeout process is the team timeout. And I'm focused there on stop any questions from the team. I think it's really important that we as surgeons make sure that everyone in the team introduces themselves, delineates their role in the operating theatre, and I make it clear to everybody, if you are concerned, put up your hand and tell me, or say, stop, I'm not happy, something's going wrong here. And that very much relates to cockpit resource management. My father was an airline pilot, and I was very jealous of the standard operating procedures that occurred in airlines, and that they were 100%, 10 times, 100 times as much safer than we were because they had these systems. And basically what cockpit resource management means, it looks at human factors. And that is, anybody in the team, as I said before, can stop. And even the first officer may be somewhat junior to the captain. If he says, "Oh, sir, I think that black cloud might be a mountain. Do you think we should maybe do a right-hand turn and avoid killing everybody on the aeroplane?" So, that's something that I think is important. And it's all about teamwork. Although we are individuals, it's important about working in the team, having situation awareness, making decision-making, and make it a safe place to be in the operating theatre. The next thing that we've introduced is ERAS, the early recovery after surgery, which has made a significant improvement to our patients, reducing our length of stay and reducing post-operative complications. And here's a graph to illustrate how the accelerated recovery pathway reduces the nursing time involvement with patients. The next little thing on the horizon is this thing called HACS, which is something we're going to have to deal with, these hospital-acquired complications. The Commission is going to be fairly stringent on implementing this, and I suspect that the local jurisdictions, so that the local health departments, will penalise us if there is a significant post-operative complication that extends the length of stay. So we need to look at ways in which we can improve our quality programs to prevent these post-operative complications occurring and reduce the financial impediments that might make on our management of our patients. One way of doing this is this bundle of care in reducing surgical site infections, using this combination of bundles which is outlined there. And again, we did a small study on this showing that it's significantly reduced surgical site infection rates in a group of colorectal patients in our hospital. I'm coming to the end of my presentation, but I'm now going to focus on things I think surgeons do well outside the square. And the first thing is this concept of kindness to improve collegiality. And this publication is with an intensive care specialist. And what we are suggesting is that to improve collegiality, we need to be kinder to each other. Because as Don Campbell mentioned about how he slags the ED department, we are unkind to each other, and we need to look at ways in which we can improve that. So we are suggesting that at handover, rather than just being an ISBAR, it's a K-ISBAR. So you add kindness in the handover process. And so when I take my patient up to intensive care after a long day in theatre, the intensivist says, "Oh, Bruce, why don't we just sit down and have a glass of wine and mull over how the day's gone." So that's a nice act of kindness from the intensivist. The other thing I think we should do is be more reflective. And this is partly also with the College of Surgeons, but comes out of my act of kindness. And here's a typical surgeon, looks in the mirror, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the best surgeon of them all?" And the mirror says, "Not you, kid." And the surgeon says, "Why? How can it be? How do other people perceive my behaviour?" And then he thinks, maybe it's me that's the problem. And here you have an insightful surgeon. Not such a rare person, we hope. Finally, as mentioned by the previous speaker in the session before me, who was Karen, about the role of the college in dealing with bullying and harassment. You're probably aware that the college has had a beating about this over the years, and we've put in place this program of operating with respect. And it's mandatory for all surgeons to do this as part of your CPD. So, including, I hope I've been able to look at perioperative medicine from both sides now and leave you with this message from my great hero, who was also an administrator. He wasn't a surgeon, but he would have made a great surgeon, and that's Sir John Monash, who tells us to adapt as your fundamental creed, that you will equip yourself for life not solely for your own benefit, but the benefit for the whole community. Thank you.
Lee Majerison here. Thanks for listening to Top Med Talk. Now, before we let you go, it's important that we remind you to subscribe to Top Med Talk. That way you'll never, ever miss another episode. Also, if we could encourage you to join us on social media, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, pretty much every single social media platform, we're there. Join us. And finally, check out topmedtalk.com. If you go to our website, you can subscribe to email updates. That way we can always tell you where we're going to be, what we're going to be doing, and how you can join us. topmedtalk.com and click on the section marked email updates. Finally, Top Med Talk is proud to act as the broadcasting arm of EBPOM, Evidence-Based Perioperative Medicine. We'd love you to find out more about them as well. ebpom.org is their website. That's ebpom.org. And if you go to ebpom.org/meetings, you can find out about some of the wonderful meetings that we attend and cover across the year here on Top Med Talk. That's ebpom.org/meetings.